So my 12-year-old came home from a family wedding recently, and she had been out of town and as a result missed 2.5 days of school. And so for a 12-year-old, 2.5 days might as well be 2.5 months. She had walked through the door, grabbed her backpack, pulled out her iPad, looked at the list of assignments she'd missed while she was away, and she completely shut down. And I don't mean she was upset. I mean she was paralyzed. Her eyes were filling up. Her breathing was short. It was that type of overwhelm where the problem feels so big that your body decides that the safest response is to just stop moving entirely. And when I found her, she was sitting on the floor and she looked at me and she said something that I think most adults have felt, but don't really feel comfortable saying out loud. I don't even know where to start. Now, I could have done what I usually do. I could have jumped into fix-it mode. Let me see your list. Okay, this is due first. Let's start here, do this, and then that. And that's where I'm most comfortable. I'm a lawyer and I solve problems for a living. You give me a list and I will triage it in 30 seconds. But in this moment, I took a beat, and for whatever reason, I didn't do that. But I did realize in that moment, Gemma didn't need me to solve it. She needed me to sit with her in whatever she was feeling long enough for her to realize something on her own. That staircase that she was looking up at looks impossible from the bottom. But as I told her a few moments later, you don't climb a staircase all at once. You climb it one step at a time. So I sat with her while she had all of her emotions, her frustration, her tears, what felt very unfair. She had been at a family wedding, not skipping school, and now she felt like she was being punished for it with a mountain of makeup work. And so I let all of that land, and then when she was ready, I said, you know what? Let's go sit together. Let's make a list. Not do all the work right now. Just see what we're looking at. And so she wrote it all down, and once it was on paper, I could see something in her shifting. It didn't seem like a mountain anymore. It was a staircase. And so all she had to do in that moment was take the first step. She started with one assignment, probably the easiest one, and that took her maybe 15 minutes. And when that was done, something happened that I've seen 1,000 times in my career and in my own life, but it never gets old. Momentum appeared. The second assignment, which she did immediately after that, felt lighter. The third, almost as easy. By the end of that hour, she had made a significant dent in her list. Not because the work got easier, but because that first step, after she wrote out her list and created that staircase, changed the entire physics of the problem. So today, when we come back, I'm going to make the case for taking that first step. Welcome back to The Case For. I'm your host, Matt Campobasso. So today's episode is about the simplest and the hardest thing that a person can do when they're staring at something that feels too big to tackle. And that's starting. Not finishing, not mastering, not conquering, just starting, taking a single step. Because I've been convinced through my 20 years of practicing law, through parenting 3 kids, writing a book, launching this podcast, and navigating a lot of seasons of feeling overwhelmed that come along with living a life, that the first step is truly where everything changes. It's not the plan, it's not the strategy, it's not the motivation, it's just taking that step. And in my experience, the reason that most people don't take it isn't because they're lazy or incapable. It's because they're standing at the bottom of a staircase, looking up at the top, and the distance between here and there is so overwhelming that their brain tells them, don't even try. You're not going to make it. And so then people don't start. And when you don't start, the problem doesn't shrink. It grows. Because the staircase doesn't get any shorter while you're standing at the bottom. It gets longer. So here's my case. No one, not the most accomplished, most intelligent, most brilliant people, climbs a staircase by jumping to the top. Nobody climbs a ladder by grabbing the highest rung. Nobody solves a big problem by solving the whole thing at once. Every single large undertaking in your life, every career, every degree, every relationship, every book or project, every transformation was accomplished one step at a time. And the only step that actually matters is the first one. Because that first step does something that no amount of planning or thinking or worrying or strategizing can do. It creates momentum. And momentum is the only force in the world that makes that second step easier than the first. Don't get me wrong, I'm not making a case for hustle or grinding. I'm making a case for a specific, concrete, unglamorous act of doing one small thing when everything in your brain is screaming at you that you can't. Because guess what? You can. You just have to stop looking at the top of the staircase and look at that step directly in front of you. With that, let's talk about the evidence. So Exhibit A is what I call the staircase illusion. And I want to talk about why big things tend to paralyze us. Because I think most people misunderstand the source of their own feeling of being overwhelmed. When Gemma opened her school-assigned iPad that day and she saw her list of assignments, her brain did something that every human brain does when it encounters a large, complex problem. It tried to hold the entire thing all at once. Every assignment, every deadline, every piece of work. Her brain, like mine has done many times, stacked each one of those things on top of each other, and it presented it as one single terrifying object. And that single object was enormous, insurmountable, terrifying. But here's the thing. The list of things that she had to do wasn't one big thing. It was 8 things. And no individual one of those 8 things was particularly hard. Some of them were 20 minutes of work, some were 10. The problem in that moment wasn't the difficulty. The problem was the volume that she perceived in a single glance. I see this concept at play in my professional life every day. A company faces a regulatory issue and the lawyer looks at the scope of the response and freezes. Not because any one of the single tasks it would take to get from point A to point B is impossible, but the total looks impossible. A client comes to me with a dispute that involves thousands of documents and years of history, and the first thing they say is, I don't even know where to begin. And I always say the same thing. Let's begin with one document, with one conversation, with the answer to one question. Then the next, then the next. The staircase is real. The illusion is that you have to climb it all at once. And this is what I call the staircase illusion. It's the belief that the only way to get to the top is somehow to arrive there instantly. That anything less than the finished product is failure. That if you can't see the end from where you're standing, there's no point in starting. And that's the illusion that keeps more people stuck than any lack of talent or time or ability ever has. Let's talk about Exhibit B, the physics of momentum. So here's what happened with Gemma that night. She started with the easiest assignment on the list. It wasn't the most important, not the most urgent, but it was the easiest one. And when she finished it, maybe 20 minutes later, she crossed it off her list. And then when she looked at the list again, it was one thing shorter. Same list, same number of remaining items, -1. But it felt completely different. Because her act of completing one thing changed her relationship to that entire list. She was no longer a person staring at a staircase wondering if she could climb it. She was a person who had already taken the first step and was now standing on it looking at the second step. That entire concept is momentum. And momentum is not motivational. It's mechanical. It's physics. An object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion. The hardest part of every staircase isn't the middle and it's not the top. It's the transition from standing still to moving. And once you're moving, the energy required to keep going drops dramatically. Not because the steps get shorter, but because you've proven to yourself that you can take them. So that night, by the third assignment, Gemma was absolutely in a rhythm. She wasn't thinking about the total anymore. She was just taking the next step, and then the next, and then the next. And that same mountain that had reduced her to tears an hour earlier was now just a series of small tasks being checked off one by one. Not one single thing about the work had changed, but her relationship to the work did change. And that shift happened only because she took the first step. I see this in my own work constantly. When I was writing my book, it felt impossible when I was staring at a blank Word document. 280 pages later, 20 exhibits, a lifetime of material to organize. My brain at the beginning of that wanted to hold the entire book at once And the weight of that, before I had typed a single word, was crushing. But I didn't write a book. I wrote one paragraph, and then another, and then a page and a chapter. And eventually, one step at a time, that book existed. And it wasn't because I was disciplined. It was because I had started. Let's talk about Exhibit C, which is coming up with the plan before you take that step. And I want to be honest about something, because I think there's a nuance here that matters. I didn't just tell Gemma to start. Before she took that first step, there was a plan, and that plan was crucial. When she was sitting there overwhelmed, the first thing I said wasn't just start. The first thing I said was, let's make a list. Because you can't take a step if you don't know what the steps are. You can't climb a staircase if you can't see the stairs. So she wrote down all of her assignments, all of her deadlines, her requirements. And as I watched her, I think the act of writing it down did something immediate for her. It took that problem, undefined, out of her head, and it put it on paper. In her head, it was a fog. On paper, it was a list. And in my experience, a list is manageable in a way that a fog never is. Because a list has edges. It has a beginning and an end. You can see the whole thing. You count the items. You can sort them. You can pick the easiest one and start there. As a lawyer, this is exactly how I approach complex problems. Before I do anything, I scope it. What are the issues? How many are there? Which ones are urgent? Which ones can wait? Which ones are easy wins and which ones require a lot more work? That scoping exercise, the list, the inventory, the assessment of what's actually in front of you, that's not the work itself. It's the thing that makes the work possible. Because it transforms a vague, overwhelming sense of too much into a concrete, visible set of stairs. So the sequence matters. You don't just start. You see the staircase first, you count the steps, and then you take the first one. The plan without the step is just a list on paper. The step without the plan is just motion without direction. And to be successful, you need both. But the plan comes first, and the step comes immediately after. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but right now. Because the gap between the plan and the first step is where most people lose their nerve. Finally, I want to talk about Exhibit D, which really focuses on every big thing you've ever done. I want you to think about the biggest thing you've ever accomplished. A degree, a career, a relationship, your house, your family. Maybe a project that seemed impossible and then somehow got done. And now I want you to remember the beginning, not the celebration, not the finish line, but the first step, the application you submitted, your first day on the job, the first conversation you ever had with the person that became your partner, the first dollar you saved, the first sentence you wrote. Those are the steps, the first steps that make everything else possible. And I'd bet that in the moment you took it, it probably didn't feel significant. It may have felt small, maybe even trivial, but it ended up being the most important thing you did in the entire process. Because without it, nothing that followed could have happened. My podcast, this podcast that you're listening to right now, it started with one episode. And that first episode was terrifying. I had never done it before. I didn't know if anyone would listen. I didn't know if I was any good at it. I didn't know if I had enough to say, but I recorded it, and that was my first step. And here we are, dozens of episodes later. Because I took one step, and the staircase that is this podcast appeared beneath me. My book started with one paragraph written at home on a weekday afternoon. My legal career started with one day at the state's attorney's office in 2006. I didn't know anyone. My family started with one conversation with a person I had never met before. Every single thing in my life that I'm proud of was at one point or another a staircase that I was standing at the bottom of, wondering if I could climb it. And every single time, the answer was the same. One step at a time. Gemma's homework was not a big deal in the grand scheme of her life. After she finished that night, I told her, a month from now, you're not going to remember this. But I do want her to remember is what it felt like to sit down, make a list, plan, and then take that first step. Because I don't think she's going to forget the feeling of being paralyzed and then moving anyway. She's not going to forget the physics of momentum. And the next time she stands at the bottom of a staircase, whether it's college applications or a first job or a huge project that feels impossible, she's going to have something in her toolkit that most people don't. The memory of a night where the list was too long and she did it anyway, one step at a time. So now that we've made our way through the evidence, let's take a pass at a cross-examination. So there's an objection here. Maybe you're listening and you're thinking, hey, Matt, some things are just genuinely too big. Not every single problem is a staircase you can climb one step at a time. Some situations require more than starting. They require resources, support, expertise, help. So telling someone to take that first step is really oversimplifying what are otherwise incredibly complex problems. That objection is fair. I want to acknowledge that. Some problems are structural. Some require help or money or time or expertise that you may not currently have. I'm not pretending that every overwhelming situation is solved by starting a list. But I would push back here a little bit. I'm not just saying just take the first step as though that step is trivial. What I'm saying is that first step is the hardest, but it's the most important part. And that first step might be asking for help. It might be making a phone call. It might be admitting that you're overwhelmed. It might just be writing down the problem so you can see it clearly enough to understand the kind of help that you need. The step doesn't have to be a task on the list. The step is whatever moves you from standing still to actually moving forward. And even the most complex, resource-intensive, impossible-feeling problem in the world begins with that transition, from being still to moving, from staring to doing, from paralyzed to one step forward. Gemma's first step was not an assignment, it was a list. The list was the step that made the steps visible. And sometimes that's all you need to do to break that spell. So here's what that night with Gemma taught me. The staircase will always look impossible from the bottom, always. Whether you're 12 and looking at a list of makeup assignments, or you're 47 and you're looking at a book you haven't written, or a career you want to change, or a conversation you've been avoiding, or a life that needs rebuilding. The view from the bottom is designed to stop you. It's supposed to look big. That's what staircases do when you try to see the whole thing at once. But you don't have to see the whole thing. You just have to see the next step. One rung, one stair, one assignment, a paragraph, a conversation, just today. That's it. When you take that step, something mechanical happens. Momentum appears. The second step gets easier. The third, easier still. And before you know it, you're climbing. And that's not because the staircase got shorter. It's because you stopped looking at the top and started looking at your feet. Just a few nights ago, I watched my daughter go from tears to momentum to the pride of accomplishment in less than 60 minutes. From total paralysis to absolute progress. From, hey, Dad, I don't know where to start, to crossing things off of her list with a focus that impressed me. And the only thing that changed between those two versions of her was one step. That first one. So listen, whatever your staircase is right now, if it's a project, a goal, a change in your life, a thing that keeps you up at night because it feels too big, you don't have to climb the whole thing today. You just have to take that first step. So make that list, see the stairs, and then start. The momentum is going to take care of the rest. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about some micro tools that I think can help each of us take that first step. First, make a list. Whatever's overwhelming you right now, take it out of your head and put it on paper. Every item, every task, every piece of the problem. And don't organize it yet. Just get it out of the fog and onto a surface where you can see it. Remember, a list has edges, a fog doesn't. And you can't climb stairs that you can't see. Second, start with the easiest step. Not the most important, not the most urgent, the easiest. There's nothing wrong with that. The one you can finish in 15 or 20 minutes or an hour or tomorrow. Complete it, cross it off your list, and pay attention to what happens to your body when you do. That feeling, that's momentum arriving. There's physics in shifting from being still to moving. And then you ride that into the second step. Third, this one's key. Stop looking at the top of the staircase. This week, every time you catch yourself staring at the full scope of something and feeling paralyzed, redirect your eyes. Look at your feet. Look at the step directly in front of you. Just the next one. The top is not going anywhere. It will absolutely be there when you get there. But you're not going to get there by staring at it. You're going to get there by stepping. So that's the case for today. And if you're standing at the bottom of a staircase in your life right now, personally or professionally, and you're wondering if you can climb it, let me tell you this, you absolutely can. But you're not going to do it all at once. So today, figure out that first step and take it. That's literally all it takes to change the physics of what's going on in your life. If this episode landed with you, please post on social media with hashtag #TheCase4 and tell me, what is your staircase right now? And what's the first step that you're going to take this week to climb that staircase? As always, thanks for tuning in. And please remember, whatever your case is, don't be afraid to build it and carry it out into the real world.